Good evening, friends. Tonight's report begins with a story that has sent shockwaves through military and political circles alike. What seemed like a brief update from the front has quickly turned into one of the most discussed developments of the winter. Reports are pouring in from multiple fronts, and each one appears to contradict the previous, leaving observers puzzled and citizens anxious. The battle for Kupiansk, a small but strategically crucial city, has become a symbol of the broader struggle now unfolding in the region. While official channels insist the situation is fully under control, eyewitnesses and independent sources paint a picture far more complex and far more troubling. According to Russian military correspondents, the Ukrainian army has managed to reclaim control over Kupiansk. This statement, simple at first glance, carries enormous implications. If confirmed, it would mark one of the most significant reversals in recent months. Yet, at nearly the same moment, Russian military reports claim the exact opposite, that Kupiansk has been fully liberated by assault units of the 68th Motor Rifle Division, part of the 6th Army. These contrasting accounts have created an atmosphere of uncertainty and confusion, one in which every new claim seems to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it.
The Russian side has described the operation as a Christmas gift, declaring that the town is now entirely under their control and that only small, scattered enemy groups remain. But beneath these triumphant declarations, frustration is growing. Voices from within the ranks are beginning to question the official narrative. Some soldiers, speaking in private conversations now circulating on social media, express disbelief at the way information is being presented. They describe mounting losses, chaotic decision-making, and an alarming disconnect between what is happening on the ground and what is being reported to the highest levels of command. The situation has become so tense that even loyal commentators, those who have long defended the military's actions, are beginning to show cracks in their composure. One correspondent, visibly shaken, questioned whether the leadership truly understands the gravity of what is happening. He wondered aloud if President Putin himself is even aware of the real state of affairs, hinting that the chain of command may be hiding crucial information. Others have begun to name names, calling on senior figures like General Gerasimov to show courage and accountability rather than protect reputations. At the same time, state media continues to promote narratives of valor and faith, portraying the war as a sacred struggle against evil. Television personalities insist that Russia's mission is righteous, that victory is inevitable, and that God is with us. But as one commentator cynically noted, the promises of divine support ring hollow when contrasted with the visible reality: burned-out vehicles, exhausted troops, and growing public disillusionment. What was once presented as a patriotic duty now feels, to many, like a grim obligation with no clear end in sight. Meanwhile, the contrast between the front lines and life in Russia itself grows sharper. In cities far from the war zone, discontent is quietly spreading. The situation in Saratov, where nearly 100,000 people were left without heating in sub-zero temperatures, has become a national embarrassment. Once, the narrative warned that Europe would freeze without Russian gas. Now, it is Russians themselves who shiver in the cold. Local residents are furious, asking how a country so rich in oil and gas could fail to keep its own citizens warm. This irony has not gone unnoticed abroad, and it is adding fuel to an already volatile public mood. Elsewhere, social media users are sharing stories that further undermine the image of unity and prosperity. One viral recording captures a local businesswoman scolding her employees for giving her what she called an insulting gift for the holidays. Her tirade, filled with disdain for ordinary workers, has become a symbol of the growing disconnect between Russia's elite and its people.
"You gave me 1,500 rubles?" she snapped. "Buy yourselves a cake instead." The clip spread rapidly, becoming a bitter reminder of how out of touch some in power have become, while ordinary citizens struggle to make ends meet. And then, amid these domestic frustrations, comes an announcement that few expected.
the appointment of a new commander for Russia's drone forces. The man chosen is not a decorated officer, nor a specialist in modern warfare, but a businessman known by an unflattering nickname, Yura the Toilet. His appointment has stunned military observers. Before the war, he reportedly sold plumbing supplies. Now, he oversees one of the most crucial technological branches of the Russian army. Critics say his lack of qualifications reflects a deeper rot within the system, a sign that loyalty and profit matter more than competence or experience. As this strange and troubling story unfolds, it becomes clear that Kupiansk is only part of a much larger picture. The front lines may shift, but the deeper battle over truth, accountability, and trust has just begun. What is happening behind closed doors? Who benefits from the chaos, and who is being silenced? The answers to these questions will be explored in the next part of our report. Stay with us, subscribe, and don't miss what comes next, because the real story is only beginning to surface. The next phase of our report delves into what is now becoming the central theme of the entire story: the collision between official narratives and the stark realities experienced by those directly involved. As the situation around Kupiansk unfolds, the fog of war has given way to a clearer, if deeply unsettling, picture. Ukrainian forces, after weeks of intense fighting, appear to have re-established positions on the eastern outskirts of the city, while Russian units have withdrawn to defensive lines beyond the Oskil River. Satellite images, verified by independent monitoring groups, show evidence of destroyed armored vehicles and makeshift fortifications hastily abandoned. The discrepancy between the official Russian statements and what these images reveal has ignited a wave of criticism both within the military establishment and among pro-government commentators who are no longer willing to stay silent. At the heart of this growing storm lies the issue of accountability. Officers in the field are reportedly furious that their reports have been altered before reaching higher command. According to several sources familiar with the situation, casualty figures have been systematically understated, and failed offensives have been described as tactical regroupings. The resulting confusion has led to operational failures that could have been avoided. A senior Russian officer speaking anonymously to a Telegram channel known for accurate battlefield reporting stated that Kupiansk was not lost in a day. It was lost through months of deception. His words have since circulated widely, symbolizing the widening rift between those on the front and those in Moscow's corridors of power. This internal discontent is not limited to the armed forces. Political observers have noted growing unease within the ruling party itself, as regional officials struggle to maintain public confidence amid mounting economic strain. The breakdowns in infrastructure across cities like Saratov and Kemerovo are only the most visible symptoms of a deeper malaise. The once celebrated narrative of resilience and self-reliance is beginning to falter under the weight of reality. People see rising prices, shortages of imported goods, and an economy that increasingly depends on military contracts and state subsidies. In conversations on Russian social networks, phrases like temporary difficulties and patriotic patience are met with weary sarcasm. Even loyal supporters now admit privately that the system feels exhausted. Meanwhile, the story of Yura the Toilet, whose appointment to lead the drone forces sparked outrage, has evolved into a national scandal. Journalists from several independent outlets have uncovered a network of companies linked to his name, many of which were awarded lucrative defense contracts during the past year. These firms, according to investigative reports, supplied critical drone components that failed repeatedly under combat conditions. In some cases, the equipment reportedly disintegrated within days of deployment due to poor assembly and lack of quality control. Soldiers on the front lines refer to these drones bitterly as disposable birds, saying that every malfunction costs lives. Despite the growing outcry, officials have avoided addressing the issue directly, insisting that all procurement followed proper procedures.
Insiders, however, describe a system built not for innovation or efficiency, but for profit and influence. The drone command's rapid expansion created opportunities for individuals with the right connections to secure contracts worth billions of rubles. The war turned into a business project, said one defense industry engineer, whose identity remains concealed for safety reasons. It's not about technology anymore, it's about access. His words echo a sentiment increasingly shared across Russia's defense sector, where qualified engineers and scientists find themselves sidelined by those with political ties. The situation has led to technological stagnation, just as Ukraine continues to receive advanced equipment from its Western allies. The appointment of such an inexperienced figure to a critical military role has also sparked heated debate among Russia's military analysts. Retired officers and war correspondents have openly questioned how a man with no formal education in military science or engineering could rise so quickly. They point to his pre-war career as a modest businessman selling bathroom fixtures, a detail that, once mocked in private circles, has now become public knowledge. In televised debates, commentators struggle to defend this decision, resorting to vague explanations about trust and management talent. Yet even these justifications ring hollow against the backdrop of ongoing battlefield setbacks. This controversy has reignited broader discussions about corruption and cronyism within the Russian defense establishment. In recent weeks, multiple reports have surfaced of poorly equipped units being sent into combat with outdated or malfunctioning equipment. In some cases, soldiers have had to purchase their own gear through private donations. The Ministry of Defense, for its part, has issued repeated assurances that all necessary provisions are being delivered. But footage from the front tells another story. Videos show volunteers scrambling to raise funds for night vision devices, communication systems, and protective clothing. The contrast between official promises and visible reality could not be more stark. As this disillusionment spreads, public trust in the military hierarchy continues to erode. Many Russians who once viewed the war as a matter of national pride now describe it as a source of fatigue and quiet despair. The speeches promising swift victory have given way to cautious rhetoric about strategic patience and long-term goals. Yet behind closed doors, officials are increasingly worried about morale, not just among soldiers, but among civilians. Regional leaders have been instructed to intensify patriotic education programs and highlight stories of heroism, but these efforts often backfire, perceived as tone-deaf propaganda in the face of daily hardships. Kupiansk has thus become more than a battlefield. It has become a metaphor for the entire conflict, a mirror reflecting the contradictions, failures, and disillusionment that define this phase of the war. The soldiers who fought there are being hailed as heroes, but few believe that their sacrifices will change the overall trajectory. "We hold the line because we must," said one wounded soldier interviewed in Belgorod. "But we no longer believe the people giving orders understand what we're holding it for." His statement encapsulates the quiet resignation that now pervades both the military and the society watching from afar. At the same time, events on the international stage add another layer of tension. The recent strike on the Novoshachtinsk oil refinery, one of the largest in southern Russia, attributed to Ukrainian Storm Shadow missiles, has underscored the vulnerability of key infrastructure far from the front lines. Video footage shows columns of smoke rising above the industrial complex, followed by reports of temporary fuel shortages in nearby regions. Officials have downplayed the incident, calling it a minor fire, but residents and local media describe significant damage. The attack is seen by analysts as a symbolic blow, a reminder that the war's consequences are no longer confined to distant trenches. In Ukraine, meanwhile, the mood is one of cautious determination. Officials in Kiev emphasize that operations near Kupiansk are part of a broader strategy to reclaim occupied territories and disrupt enemy logistics. Western support continues to flow, albeit with growing debate among allies about long-term commitments. Ukrainian soldiers describe the fighting as intense but methodical, with precision strikes designed to wear down Russian defenses. For them, Kupiansk is not just a town. It is a gateway to the broader liberation of the Kharkiv region. Their confidence stands in sharp contrast to the uncertainty now visible on the other side of the border. The information war, however, remains relentless. State television in Russia continues to frame the situation as under control, focusing on stories of bravery and divine mission.
But on the internet, alternative voices grow louder each day, challenging the narrative with evidence, testimonies, and raw emotion. The divide between the official story and the lived experience of millions has never been wider. The result is an atmosphere thick with contradiction, pride mixed with fear, defiance laced with exhaustion, faith shadowed by doubt. In the next part of this report, we will delve deeper into the ripple effects of these events, how they are reshaping the political landscape, the economy, and the fragile sense of identity within Russia itself. Stay tuned, subscribe, and prepare for a closer look at the aftermath, the investigations, and the voices now daring to speak out. As the dust begins to settle over Kupiansk and the echoes of artillery fade, the broader consequences of these events are only beginning to reveal themselves. The war has entered a stage that is no longer defined solely by territorial gains or losses, but by the deep psychological, political, and social fractures spreading across both nations. In Russia, the official narrative of inevitable victory is being tested by the mounting weight of public disillusionment, and in Ukraine, the cost of perseverance continues to climb as the country fights not only for its territory, but for its survival as a free state. The battlefields have moved beyond the trenches. They now stretch into the realms of information, economy, and belief. Within Russia, the aftershocks of Kupiansk have exposed the inner fragility of the system built over 2 decades of control. The silence of the Kremlin in the face of conflicting battlefield reports has fueled speculation that not all is well within the upper echelons of command. Analysts in Moscow note that for the first time, state media outlets have quietly reduced their coverage of the special operation, replacing it with cultural programs and domestic news. It is a subtle but telling shift, one that suggests the leadership is aware of fatigue among viewers who have grown weary of hearing promises that never materialize. Behind closed doors, regional governors are receiving new instructions, not to speak too openly about mobilization, not to report local losses without central approval, and to keep patriotic rallies smaller, more symbolic in tone. The silence is strategic, but it carries a heavy cost. Families of missing soldiers continue to search for information through unofficial channels. Social networks are filled with photographs of young men who have disappeared without trace, their loved ones posting desperate pleas for any news. The number of such cases grows daily, even as officials insist that all personnel are accounted for. Independent rights groups that once documented these stories have been forced to operate from abroad, their websites blocked, but their reports shared through encrypted apps. The gap between official data and reality widens with every passing week, and with it, the public's trust in authority continues to erode. In this vacuum, figures once dismissed as marginal voices are gaining attention. Former military correspondents, disillusioned propagandists, and even a handful of local politicians have begun to speak out, questioning the direction of the war and the integrity of those leading it. One of them, a former pro-Kremlin blogger, recently said on a live stream, "We were told that everything is going according to plan. But whose plan? Because it's certainly not the soldiers' plan." His statement was quickly deleted from official platforms, yet fragments of it circulated widely before being taken down. It reflects a growing undercurrent of dissent that no longer comes only from the opposition, but from within the system itself. Economically, the consequences are becoming harder to conceal. Sanctions have reshaped the landscape of everyday life in Russia. Imported goods have become luxury items, and industries once dependent on Western components struggle to maintain production.
The defense sector, now the primary engine of the economy, is simultaneously a source of national pride and systemic corruption. Reports indicate that billions of rubles have been diverted through shell companies, many of them linked to mid-level bureaucrats who enriched themselves through inflated contracts. This has created a paradox. While the state calls for total mobilization of resources, vast sums continue to vanish into private hands. The result is a war machine sustained not by efficiency, but by inertia, running simply because it cannot afford to stop. At the human level, the toll is visible everywhere. In small towns and industrial regions, men of fighting age are conspicuously absent. Their families rely on the state's compensation payments, which arrive irregularly and often only after months of paperwork. Schools and hospitals face shortages of staff as mobilization and emigration deplete the workforce. Inflation has quietly eroded the value of salaries, and even in large cities like St. Petersburg and Yekaterinburg, once bustling commercial centers, now show signs of decline. Storefronts stand empty, construction projects are frozen, and queues form at post offices where people collect their pensions and government allowances. Yet, through all this, the propaganda continues to insist that life remains normal. Across the border, Ukraine endures its own hardships, but the mood there is different, grim yet determined. Kupiansk's recapture, though costly, has strengthened a sense of resolve. Civilians in liberated areas describe a mixture of relief and disbelief. Streets are scarred, buildings stand hollowed out, but people return, sweeping debris and hanging flags in windows.
In Kharkiv and Sumy, volunteers continue to collect donations for soldiers at the front, while local businesses adapt to wartime realities. Ukraine's resilience, built on necessity and unity, contrasts sharply with the stagnation visible in Russia's rear. President Volodymyr Zelensky's speeches emphasize endurance, acknowledging the sacrifices without concealing the pain. His words may not erase the exhaustion of war, but they resonate because they confront the truth rather than disguise it. Internationally, Kupiansk has become a symbol once more, this time not of immediate military triumph, but of the larger moral and strategic struggle defining the conflict. Western nations interpret the city's renewed Ukrainian control as proof that continued support yields results. Discussions within NATO and the European Union increasingly focus on how to maintain that momentum without escalating into direct confrontation. Meanwhile, in Moscow, diplomats attempt to project confidence abroad while privately acknowledging a sense of strategic drift. Each new sanction, each new loss deepens Russia's isolation, driving it further into reliance on limited partnerships with China, Iran, and North Korea. Yet, even these relationships carry their own costs and humiliations, as Moscow becomes the junior partner in alliances once unthinkable. The psychological landscape inside Russia continues to darken.
State television presenters, who once spoke with fiery conviction, now appear tired, their monologues mechanical. Public rituals of loyalty, flag raisings, patriotic concerts, televised awards seem increasingly hollow. Younger generations quietly tune out, focusing instead on finding ways to leave the country or to build parallel lives detached from the state's narrative. The internet, despite censorship, remains a battlefield of truth and illusion, where reality leaks through in fragments. Drone footage from Kupiansk, intercepted communications, leaked documents, unfiltered testimonies. These glimpses erode the myth of total control and remind people that beneath the slogans, something deeply human still resists. And yet, despite all the cracks, the system endures. It endures through fear, habit, and the sheer weight of bureaucracy. It endures because many still believe that questioning the official version is pointless or dangerous. It endures because in a country where war has become the background noise of daily life, fatigue has replaced outrage. But history shows that such endurance is never infinite. As the winter deepens and new offensives loom on the horizon, Russia faces not only an external enemy, but an internal reckoning. Kupiansk was not just a military episode, it was a revelation of how far narratives can stretch before they break. In the coming months, the consequences of these events will unfold across every sphere of Russian life.
There will be more reports, more justifications, more attempts to shift blame. But beneath it all, the central question will remain the same. How long can a nation live in denial of its own reality? As the story of Kupiansk fades from headlines, its echoes will persist, in the hearts of soldiers, in the fears of families, and in the unspoken awareness that truth, however suppressed, always finds a way to surface. Stay with us, subscribe, and continue to follow this unfolding story, because what is happening now is not the end, but the beginning of a much deeper chapter in the